Rusty, and today we're going to delve into the exciting world of puff pastry and make some turnovers. Alright, so when you make turnovers, you want to make sure that your dough is 10 inches wide and about 15 inches long. If it's not, you might want to use your rolling pin to fix that. And this is just a little bit short, but it'll work for what we're going to do. So here's how this, you can come on in, it's okay if you get in the shot. We're going to mark it at 5 inches because we want 5-inch sides on our turnovers. So 5 there, 5 there, and then 5 inches here too. Whenever you're trying to make a turnover or anything square, you want to start with a square. So mark it at 5 and 10, mark it at 5 and 10. Okay, so now I have it laid out for 5-inch squares, and I like to use my straight edge because I can't cut a straight edge or straight line to save me. I like to use my straight edge to help me out with that, and then I can follow that. Oh, look at that line, it's not terribly straight. And there's another one, okay, and then we can cut them into 5-inch squares. They're in the middle. And then pile them up. It helps to hold the cold in if you pile them up. Here I didn't have a mark, so I'm going to make a little mark. Again, I'm artistically challenged. I don't draw straight lines very well. I don't color inside the lines very well. That boy can make some turnovers. Alright, so I've got my 6 squares, which is what you're going to need to make. And so I'm going to take my squares and I'm going to lay those out at this point. And I would want to do this directly on the tray, but it's easier to see if we're not necessarily on the tray. Get them nice and close together. And we're going to take our filling, and it's fancy. We've got a nice little bag here. You can use a spoon, you can scoop some filling in there. You don't want to put too much. Just about a tablespoon in the center. They make little handy packs for this that you can cut the corners off of. Now those last couple didn't have any fruit in them, and that's problematic, but it'll work out okay for demo purpose. You want to make sure when you're serving your customer that you get a little bit of fruit in each one. Now I don't use egg wash on puff pastry, and the reason for that is because we're expecting that dough to raise, to expand. And if we use egg wash and it bleeds over the side, that can cause the edge of the dough to stick together and it won't raise properly. So I just use a little bit of water, and your fingers will work fine. You don't have to get a pastry brush for this, although I do like a spray bottle, just mist the entire top of the dough. And now, since they're squares, they should fold over evenly into triangles. This is something we don't want to see, and I did that just for demo purpose. You don't want to see that because that's not going to stick together real well, and it also looks a little messy. So we clean that off of there. We'll give that a little extra love here in just a second. I'm going to fold all of these over into turnovers. And then we're going to go a little bit further to make sure that the edges seal up. You can do these in any flavor you want. I like apple with a little cinnamon sugar on top. I like blueberry. I love cherry. What we're going to do is we're going to take a tool, and it could be anything really. You could use your spoon, you could use your ruler, you could use a paring knife, and we're just going to indent that edge. Now this isn't decorative as much as it is to seal that edge. But we want to do it evenly in case it shows. We want it to look like we meant to do it, and it isn't some accident. We wouldn't want to use a fork to do this because you would make really thin lines that would have a tendency to burn. But that just seals them up a little bit further and ensures that your edges aren't going to come open. That mashing isn't going to do a whole lot to the layers of the puff pastry. It'll still raise up really well. The last thing we want to do before we bake them is vent them. If we don't put a vent in there, all the moisture that's in that filling is going to come out. It's going to come out in a hole in the side. It's not going to be a pretty way, it's not going to be a decorative way. So we want to do that nicely. And to do that, I like a pair of scissors where I cut a hole. Now I don't want to make it look like an accident. Again, that's not a vent. That's going to close up pretty rapidly, and then you're going to have the blowout on the side. This hole, however, is not. And this dough is going to go ahead and raise, and it's going to hide a lot of that work. So you want to make sure that when you cut vents, you can see the inside of the turnover. From here, we want to go ahead and put those back on the sheet pan, and I like to space them out a little bit, and then we'd have one over here. If I wanted to, what I could also do, after I've indented this one, I could wet it a little bit and roll it in some sanding sugar. Or actually just put the top in sanding sugar. I wouldn't want it in the bottom. So we wet the top here, lay it in some sanding sugar, and then we'll have a nice crystalline look to the surface. It could be cinnamon sugar, there could be flavor in the sugar, it could be colored sugar, but that's a little more than I generally will do with a turnover. But make sure that you seal that edge, and make sure, really sure, that you vent them. You can finish these once they're baked with a little bit of white roll icing or fondant icing strung on there. That looks really nice. Let me do the last one with a different tool just so you can see. You don't have to use that. I'll use the spoon. That'll be fancy. Okay, and again, it's not really supposed to be decorative. It's probably not going to show, but just in case it does, we want to use a tool that's going to make it look attractive. And we'll vent those. We want to bake these at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. I really prefer a deck oven directly on the surface of the oven, and that way they get well baked in the bottom. That's the biggest problem area for turnovers, is that bottom. It won't bake properly because it's got all that wet filling on there, and so that it never bakes. You've got that raw dough on the bottom. 375 in a convection or conventional oven like the real oven, or 400 in a deck oven directly on the surface, give you a nice even bake without blowing out the sides, and give you a nice GB&D. And that's turnovers.